Hey there, y'all. Welcome back to another wonderful episode of True North Sports Talk podcast. And this week's show, we are going to talk about what happened yesterday. We had 4 Game 1s in the Major League Baseball Division Series. So, that's where our focus is going to be today. We're going to take a look at each game. We're going to do some analysis, talk about the ins and outs of each game, and hopefully get you all set up for there's 2 Game 2s today. You have your Blue Jays Yankees at 4 o'clock, and I believe Detroit Seattle at 8 o'clock. So, let's get us going. Let's find out what happened yesterday. Let's analyze what happened yesterday. And we'll get into our show for the week. So, October 4th, 2025, there were 4 Division Series Game 1s. And each one delivered drama and storylines and performances that have all of baseball fans buzzing across North America. As I mentioned, we're going to be breaking down all 4 games in depth today. We're saving our biggest story for the end, and we'll let you know what that is when we get there, and what might be one of the more epic Game 1s in recent history. We're not rushing to get there. We're going to give proper attention to what Milwaukee did yesterday, the Dodgers' comeback. Detroit and Seattle had an extra innings thriller yesterday, so we're going to talk about all of those things, and we're going to try and cover it in a way that gives you all the information you need to know. And all the home teams yesterday, oddly enough, went 4-0, and except for Seattle, and so I would say that makes for some compelling stories. Alright, I don't think that number's actually right. I think it's 2 out of 4. Alright, so we're going to look at the Milwaukee Brewers, and they had a very strong start to their National League Division Series against the Chicago Cubs. And after a point, this was more of a statement than just a win. And it shows that the Milwaukee Brewers are very serious contenders for the actual World Series. Now, yesterday started out with a bit of a sour note, really. The first pitch or first batter of the game was definitely the first batter of the game. It might have even been the first pitch, was rocketed into left field, and Milwaukee was suddenly down 1-0. So, what happened next? Well, Milwaukee went to work, and they started getting hits, running the bases, and they just went on an offensive explosion yesterday. The Cubs bullpen didn't really hold up, and that really strengthened the odds for a Milwaukee's World Series. This game completely shifted the potential perception of this series. So, offensive explosion sure was 9-3. At one point it was 9-1. Milwaukee's lineup was relentless. They were led by Christian Yelich. They jumped on the Cubs starter really early, as I said, bottom of the first. And that led to Chicago never really threatening the Brewers beyond that first inning home run. The Brewers had timely hitting, they gap-to-gap power, and the kind of patient at-bats that force pitchers to make mistakes. And boy did they ever in that game. Having watched quite a large chunk of that game, what made this offensive performance special was the distribution. That'll sound familiar later on. It wasn't just one guy or 2 guys. The Brewers got production basically 1 through 9 throughout their lineup, and that's the kind of balanced attack that led them to the best record in all of baseball this year and makes them extremely dangerous over the course of a 5-game series. Now, the Chicago Cubs, well, they struggled in this game. Chicago came into this series with a lot of momentum from their wild card victory, but they looked completely overmatched on Saturday. Now, was that a rest issue, or was that just simply Milwaukee's that good? Their starting pitcher, Matt Boyd, was on 3 or 4 days rest. That simply didn't seem like enough. He couldn't get deep into the game, and that forced them to go to the bullpen early. In October and playoff baseball, that is always a dangerous proposition. And as you could tell by the score, it didn't really work out in their favor. The Cubs' offense, which had been clutch in the wild card round, all of a sudden went quiet against a strong Milwaukee pitching staff. They managed just 3 runs. They looked frustrated at the plate much of the game, and it just was not their day. On the Milwaukee side, there was a lot of pitching dominance happening. Their staff did exactly what they needed to do, but what we've seen them do all season long. They kept Chicago's hitters off balance, and then off the base pass, they forced them into uncomfortable at-bats, and the combination of starting pitching effectiveness and what has been a very reliable bullpen all year is what makes the Brewers so dangerous. And just watching that game, the eye test yesterday that's a really strong team. And other than maybe the Dodgers and Phillies, I can't see much of a competition with the rest of the National League. So when you can score 9 runs, pitch effectively, play good defense, you're going to win most playoff games and most games in general. That's the formula Milwaukee executed to perfection in Game 1. This Game 1 win is massive for Milwaukee. It's their first playoff win in a long time. They're now 1 win away from taking a commanding 2-0 series lead. They got to win 3 to win the series. And they've shown Chicago exactly what kind of challenge they're facing. The Cubs, on the other hand, they need a complete mental reset. They need to rework some strategy that they were using in Game 1. And they really can't afford to fall behind 0-2 against a team that is as complete as Milwaukee. Now, the announcers yesterday talked about this quite a lot. It's like almost a 75%. Whoever wins Game 1 wins the series. So that was all 4 games were extremely important. Milwaukee's crowd was electric, as you would expect, providing exactly the kind of atmosphere that makes playing at home in October so valuable. The Brewers fed off of that energy and turned it into what would be a dominant performance. American Family Field was rocking all afternoon after that initial home run, and that environment creates even more pressure on the visiting team, while it gives energy to the home team. What's next? Well, Game 2 is going to be crucial for Chicago. They need to find a way to slow down Milwaukee's offense. They need to slow down the game in general and let it come to them a little bit more. And they need to get their bats going. For the Brewers, they want to grab that 2-0 lead before the series shifts to Chicago, because that Chicago crowd is going to make it very hard on the Milwaukee Brewers. So they want to go in there 2-0 and maybe try and steal one in Chicago if they can. Milwaukee's put themselves in a very, very strong position. One more home win, and they're potentially a game away from the NLCS. Moving over to the other NLDS game with the Dodgers-Phillies, and this game didn't start out looking all that great for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Los Angeles came into Philadelphia and they stole game one with a 5-3 victory, as we mentioned, over the Phillies in what was probably the closest, well, no, this is the second closest fought game of the day. And so yeah, this was back and forth. The Phillies went up early and the Dodgers had to stage their comeback. They started Ohtani, and that worked out for them. He pitched well, considering he's just now getting back off of Tommy John. And so after that comeback win, that shows their championship pedigree. For the Phillies, they really got to pick it up again after that game. Dodgers comeback, Phillies bullpen meltdown, which is really surprising because they've been strong all this season. Citizens Bank Park playoff atmosphere was rocking, and this game had everything that playoff baseball should have. Early leads, lead changes, back and forth, good pitching, good defense, and so Philadelphia's early lead, they jumped out to an early lead in front of Citizens Bank Park and was absolutely rocking. Philadelphia's offense did what they needed to do to get out to an early lead, and they put a lot of pressure on Ohtani and that Dodgers pitching staff coming off the wild card to respond accordingly. Championship teams, they have been there, done that, and the Dodgers showed that they know how to handle that early adversity, and they showed exactly why all that money they spend makes them perennial World Series contenders, because they have the experience and the talent to know what to do, and they don't panic easily. So when the Dodgers went down early, they didn't panic, they stayed patient, they worked the counts, and they waited for their opportunities. When they came, the Dodgers capitalized with clutch hitting and solid situational baseball, as they were known for. This wasn't a slugfest by any means, although Teo hit that home run at the end there. It was surgical. The Dodgers picked apart the Phillies pitching staff with the kind of professional at-bats that you would expect from the Dodgers, and that come from years of October experience. In this game, there was a real tight battle of the bullpen, and this game came down to how each manager managed their bullpen. The Dodgers' relief pitchers, obviously by the outcome of the score, they outperformed Philadelphia in crucial moments, and when games are this tight, each bullpen has to be on point and effective in order to get the desired outcome for each team. Now for Los Angeles, their bullpen has been their strength all season. They proved it again on Saturday, and they shut down Philadelphia's offense, and that's a high-powered offense when it mattered most. You have Schwarber, you got Bryce Harper, and there's many other guys on that team. Real Muto. That's a dangerous Philadelphia team. Speaking of Philadelphia, they missed opportunities left and right on Saturday. The Phillies had chances to extend their lead and put the game away. Unfortunately, the Dodgers pitching staff, they weren't able to capitalize on those opportunities, and missed opportunities in October, especially in a 3 out of 5 series, can be devastating. Philadelphia will be kicking themselves over those lost chances, but going forward into Game 2, if they just make some slight adjustments and clean up those mistakes, they have a real chance to take Game 2. When you have a lead against a team like the Dodgers, you really have to put your foot on their neck. Philadelphia learned that lesson the hard way, and we'll see if the momentum has completely shifted, or if this Game 1 brutal loss for Philadelphia can be the wake-up call they needed They have home field advantage. They had the early lead. And unfortunately, they let it slip away. So the real question here is going to be, how do they bounce back for Game 2? Let's hope that loss doesn't deflate the team and energize their opponent. For the Dodgers, they now have the momentum they carried over from the wild card still with them. They stole home field and showed Philadelphia that they can win in even the most hostile environments. Philadelphia will boo Santa Claus, so you know that was a tough place to go in and steal a game. Citizens Bank Park is one of baseball's most intimidating playoff venues simply because of that crowd. The Dodgers didn't flinch, and they have that mental toughness that separates championship contenders from those who are trying to reach the top. Philadelphia's crowd did everything they could to will their team to victory, but at the end of the day, LA's experience and execution won the day, because those are two things that almost always will win the day. Philadelphia faces a must-win situation going into Game 2. They need this series 1-1 going back to LA. They need to try and steal a game when they're in LA now and see if they can bring it back home for Game 5. They need their ace on the mound, and they need their offense to wake up. For Los Angeles, Game 2 is going to be about what we just mentioned, putting that foot down on Philadelphia's throat. Game 2 and the series, if they win Game 2, the series is all but over, because going home to LA, they're at least going to get 1 or 2, you would think. Otherwise, Philadelphia would have pulled off something unimaginable. Alright, so the third game that went on yesterday was the Detroit Tigers and the Seattle Mariners. This is two teams that were very solid throughout all of the year. The Detroit Tigers, they won this game in the most dramatic fashion. They beat the Seattle Mariners 3-2 in 11 innings in what was an absolute playoff classic. Now, the thing about the Seattle Mariners is they basically went on a huge run to win the American League West. And so they have been a consistent, very strong team all season long. Now, people kind of sleep on Detroit a little bit, and I think that's unfair to the Tigers, because for most of the year, up until about the last 2, maybe 3 weeks of the season, they were first in the Central Division. This is a really, really consistent and good young Detroit baseball team. I think Cleveland underestimated them a little bit because they were the team that ran the Tigers down in the Central, and maybe they underestimated them a little bit. And I wonder if the Mariners had that same issue, because this Tigers team is not someone to be trifled with. If they are somehow able to eliminate Seattle, whichever team wins the series between the Blue Jays and Yankees are really going to have their hands full with this Detroit Tigers team. So Detroit leads this series now 1-0 after that barn burner of a game yesterday, and that was everything you'd want from October baseball. So Tigers extra innings win. Mariners bullpen potentially looked exhausted after yesterday's game. Is Detroit a Cinderella story? I don't know if I would check that narrative out too hard. I don't think they are. And so this game really did, though, capture the imagination of all the fans involved. Whenever you get extra innings in baseball, that game that went to extra innings, became a war of attrition. Whose bullpen was going to stand up longer? Which bullpen had more arms? You would have thought Seattle going in because they had the week off, and which lineup had more clutch hitters. Turned out it was Detroit on this day, and which team had the mental toughness. Detroit proved they had all three. They came off of a hard-fought wild card series, and we've seen this in recent years. The tension of playoff extra innings is unlike anything else in sports. Every pitch matters, every at-bat matters. One mistake one way or the other, and that could end your season. Some people may be saying, oh, Detroit's an underdog story. I don't like that narrative, to be honest. The Tigers, like I mentioned before, they were right there all season long. I mean, no one expected them to be winning the Central all season long. You may have expected Minnesota or Cleveland to be right up there, and you wouldn't have necessarily, but Detroit really showed all season long that they're not really an underdog team. So I don't like that narrative. I really don't. There's people who are trying to spin that narrative, perhaps, because it gives Detroit a chip on their shoulder that, oh, we're the underdogs, we like that label, we're going to show everyone. I don't think you're an underdog team when for 80% of the season you're winning your division. That's not an underdog. Yeah, they kind of had a rough September and Cleveland ran them down, but I really think this Detroit team is far more dangerous than people are giving them credit for. You got Scoobo leading their pitching staff. They have a really strong bullpen, and their young players under AJ Hinch have come a long way over the last couple of years. They've made some really shrewd additions to that team. They're anchored at shortstop by Javi Baez. And they have what it takes to be a very difficult out in October baseball. This team is playing, some would say, with house money. I don't think so, but they just have this fearlessness about them. They have young players who have nothing really to lose. They have everything that, if they do well, they'll prove a lot. So young teams playing without a lot of pressure, they can be dangerous in October because they play naturally. They don't feel that pressure that makes other teams break. And so they have everything to gain. They have that mentality. They survived extra innings. For Seattle, on the other hand, this loss is not good for them. They had a couple of years where they weren't in the playoffs. They go out and they lose game one after a week layoff at home in extra innings. And that kind of loss, it'll be real interesting to see how that team bounces back. They haven't really had to face a lot of this kind of adversity with this group. So we'll see how it goes. The Mariners had chances to win this game in regulation. They didn't capitalize. In extra innings, they ran out of pitching options, which is sort of surprising because you would think all hands on deck. And they just couldn't find that clutch hitting. Obviously, with the low score, this game started out as a pitcher's duel through the first 9 innings. That makes sense given both teams have a strong starting rotation. Seattle's rotation has been elite all season. You don't win that many games without it. Detroit's pitching has improved, and that is why they are in the playoffs this season. In extra innings, it becomes about your depth. Detroit somehow had fresher arms. They used them more effectively. Seattle's crowd was electric. They created one of the loudest playoff atmospheres, and I mean, we could say this about all the home teams so far. And the Tigers were able to silence that. They were able to put that out of their mind and not allow it to affect them. And with the clutch performance when it mattered most, stealing game 1 on the road in extra innings, that's the kind of win that can really swing the momentum in Detroit's favor. Detroit is off and running now. Let's see how they carry that into Game 2. Seattle had a walk-off opportunity. They had chances to win this game on multiple occasions. They had runners in scoring position. They had their best hitters at the plate. So Cal Raleigh, the guy's name's escaping me. The guy at the top, JP. But yeah, they had all their best players up, and they just weren't able to capitalize. In playoff baseball, when you don't capitalize on those opportunities, they do come back to haunt you, as Seattle painfully found out. So what are the implications here? Detroit winning Game 1 on the road completely changes this series. They can now afford to lose Game 2, not that they're going to try to, but they still have home field advantage running out the series. Seattle faces a massive amount of pressure going into Game 2. They're still at home, and they're going to want to win one for the home crowd. Otherwise, they're going to head to Detroit, which is another tough place to play, with an 0-2 hole. And they're going to have to try and steal 2 games in Detroit, which is very difficult to do at this time of year. Game 2 obviously becomes a must-win for Seattle. They need their best pitching on the mound. They need their offense to wake up a little more than it was yesterday. And they need to shake off that disappointment and just get back to business as usual for Seattle baseball. Even though it was heartbreaking extra innings, they just need to say, okay, that's yesterday, and focus on today. For Detroit, they want to take Game 2 as well and put Seattle in a very impossible position. And the Tigers, they're playing with that confidence and belief in their team that they can win this series. All right, so the big series for us up here north of the border is the Blue Jays Yankees. Now, this game being what it was and being where I am, I watched this game in its entirety yesterday, and this is, in most baseball circles, I know like Milwaukee, Philly, a lot of those places won't agree, but this is like the Goliath of all series, being that the Blue Jays and Yankees came right down to the wire. They had the same actual record going into the playoffs, but the Blue Jays had the tiebreaker. So these are the best of the best in the American League East. And so this game just had that electric, nervous intensity right out of the gate that you would expect from this series. Kevin Gausman started the game for the Blue Jays, and he did what Kevin Gausman does. He got a 1-2-3 first inning, got the guys in the dugout, got through those initial potential jitters, and then, okay, let the boys see what they can do at the plate. Luis Gil is not your number one ace starter, and so their thing was they're going to have to get to him and get to that bullpen. They had a hard-fought series against the Boston Red Sox. They used a lot of pitchers, and so they really were in a tougher spot coming into this series than some of the other teams that came through the wild card. So it was the Blue Jays coming to the plate. George Springer led off the game with an out. Nathan Lucas, another out. So it was looking like, well, this might be a quick first inning. And then Vladimir Guerrero Jr. He got a middle in pitch, and he sent a rocket into the left field bullpen. Game 1, 1-0 for the Blue Jays at that point. And I believe Barger struck out right behind him, so that ended the first inning. Gausman came out, and he had Jazz Chisholm on first base. He had one out and Ryan McCann at the plate. Now here's where things really changed, as you could imagine. Ryan McCann got jammed and hit a broken bat line drive that, on first glance, off the bat, you thought that was going into right field. Chisholm took off for second. Vladdy dove and caught the ball. Meanwhile, the barrel of the bat's coming directly towards him. Jazz was too far beyond Guerrero to recover. Guerrero jogs to the base. Double play, inning over. And so that really settled the hearts of the team. That really settled the fans into the game. They had a 1-0 lead through 1.5 innings. They came up to the plate in the bottom, got through to where Kirk was batting. Kirk launched his first home run of the day into the left field bullpen, almost the exact spot that Guerrero hit his, and the Jays were all of a sudden up 2-0. There was a point in about the 6th inning where the Jays were up 2-1, and the Yankees had the bases loaded, and tensions were high. This was really intense baseball at this point. The Yankees had already gone to their bullpen. They'd used up their only left-handed pitcher early in the game yesterday. Even he really did settle things down, Tim Hill. But they used up their only lefty real early in the game. They went through a lot of pitchers in the game yesterday, except for Bednar. And I mean, he's their closer. I don't think they really wanted to use him. But yeah, like they went through a lot of pitchers. But in that 6th inning, it was 2-1 for the Blue Jays. They had the bases loaded. And Gausman got probably the biggest strikeout of the year. He struck out Aaron Judge. That was huge in that moment. A couple of batters later, Giancarlo Stanton's at the plate, and John Schneider made what was an interesting move, being as Mason Fluharty was up beforehand. He went to Louis Varland, though. And Louis came in, and on a 101-mile-an-hour fastball, struck out Giancarlo Stanton. Now, you look at Varland and you're like, well, this is a real young guy. But 2 years ago, against the Blue Jays, he had already pitched in playoff October baseball. So this wasn't new to him the way some might have thought. The next inning he came back out, he did a lot. Like, he didn't do it perfectly. They did end up bringing in, I believe, Brandon Little behind him. But he really set the tone for the rest of the game with that strikeout of Stanton. From that point on, the Blue Jays just did Blue Jay things. They got hits from Lucas. They got hits from Clement. They got hits from another home run from Kirk. Barger chipped in. Varsho chipped in, and once they started bringing in guys from the bench, you had Miles Straw replacing Anthony Santander, who was, I wouldn't say invisible, because he had some really strong at-bats. He made pitchers pitch 8, 10, 12 pitches to him. And even if he gets out in that scenario, that's a really good at-bat, because you're putting wear and tear on whatever pitcher you're facing. And you're giving your teammates a really good look at what he is featuring that day. So Santander had a really brilliant few at-bats when he was in the game. He had 2 from the left side, 1 from the right side. And I think he did really well, even if his stat line may not show it the way you would expect it to. So at that point, Miles Straw came in. He ran the bases really well. He got a clutch hit. And so it was really Blue Jays baseball. It was a collective team effort. So when you look at the Yankees, they're coming off, as we said, it's a real tough series against the Boston Red Sox. They used a lot of pitchers. They had to fight really hard in some close games just to be there to play the Blue Jays. They're on the road, and I don't know if you've ever been to Skydome, but when that place is full, and when it's October baseball, the electricity in that place, you can even feel it on the other side of the TV if you're not there. So they put a lot of pressure on the Yankees. They put a lot of pressure on that defense and on those pitchers. And that's what you need to do if you're the Blue Jays. For the Yankees, they need to clean up some things. They have Max Fried going today. So you would hope he's not on too short of a rest for the Yankees if you're a Yankees fan, and that he can really settle his team down. They really need a bounce back performance today to see if they can even up the series going back to New York. It's going to be a tough road to go on. They're facing Trey Savage, who has been, I almost hate to say it, but dynamite all year long. No matter where he's pitched, he's figured out how to pitch at those levels. Coming in behind him is potentially going to be an Eric Lauer, who's been phenomenal all year long. The Blue Jays have a rested bullpen still. They didn't use a whole ton of guys yesterday. Yes, they used a Jeff Hoffman, a Sir Anthony Dominguez. They used some guys out of that bullpen, but they still have Mason Fluharty, Braden Fisher, Brewell. Feel like there's someone I'm missing there. Yariel Rodriguez. So they still have a lot of guys they didn't use in game one. So we'll see how Trey Savage does in game one, how the moment is for him, and whether he can go toe-to-toe with Max Fried. The Blue Jays have to stay patient at the plate, do and have professional at-bats. Don't give the Yankees any sort of hope at this point, and just really put your foot on the Yankees' neck, because when you go into New York, that is going to be a difficult place to play, especially with that short porch in right field and all of the Yankees players that aim for that. They did a good job with Trent Grisham yesterday. They were able to contain, to a degree, Jazz Chisholm. They had Volpe not looking great at the plate. And so they just need to continue that. They need to keep the pressure on the Yankees. I've always said this about the Yankees for this season. Ryan McCann has really solidified third base for them. But that's still a defense that if you put a lot of pressure on it, it's not going to do well. So for the Blue Jays, that's the next step. For the Yankees, they just got to play Yankees baseball. And they'll be okay. It's just, for the Blue Jays, we're trying to do our best. We're going to knock them out if we can. And then see who we're facing in the next round. But yesterday's game was what you need the Blue Jays to do every game for the rest of the playoffs, basically. Have strong pitching, play their brand of defense, play their brand of offense, and this team, the only team that really worries me a whole lot, as long as they do that, would be the Milwaukee Brewers. And I think the Milwaukee Brewers play a very similar strand of baseball to what the Blue Jays do, which is why I think that they will be the toughest challenge. if the Blue Jays can make it that far. The game is at 4 o'clock today, so it'll probably be over by the time this is posted, or at least in progress. So we'll see how it goes, and through either next week or sometime throughout the week, we'll do another bit of a recap. There's the analysis for the first 4 games of the division series. And the one last note I want to make about the Blue Jays. I've been saying all along, the Blue Jays really needed to win the division and win just be the best team in the American League East for 2 reasons. First, if they played the Yankees, I saw a graphic yesterday that was before they ended up winning. But after that game, they are now 8-1 against the New York Yankees in Skydome this season. That is a large number. So they need 3 out of the 5 games to be in Skydome, because that home field is a gigantic advantage. If they can find a way to at least win 1 in New York, taking a 2-0 lead, hopefully, after leaving Skydome, if they could find 1 win at New York, they would win the series. So we'll see how it plays out. I mean, the Yankees are known to not go quietly. Max Fried is nothing to sneeze at. And so he is also a lefty. And the Jays just need to bring that patient approach to him and just find little ways to pick apart here and there. Yes, they got home runs yesterday. Do they need that? Not necessarily, although it helps. But they just got to do what they did in that 4-run inning and just gap to gap, down the lines, double, single, double, walk, whatever you can do to just keep the line moving. That's all they have to do. And just keep doing it. If they can get Fried's pitch count up early, they'll be into the bullpen early like they were yesterday. And that's just really what the Blue Jays need to do. So just that last note, this home field advantage thing isn't necessarily the be-all and end-all as Detroit and LA showed yesterday. But I think it's a big deal for the Blue Jays, just based on the splits and the records this year against the Yankees. So, check it out, 4 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 2 games going today, and then going forward, the Blue Jays' next game is on Tuesday. And yeah, we'll just keep you up to date and keep going. As always, that's our show for today. Hope you got some good information out of it. You're up to date on where the series are at. And as always, at True North Sports Talk Podcast, we will see you next time.